Welcome back to Films Recapped. Today I will show you a mystery/thriller film from 2009, called Sherlock Holmes. Warning: spoilers ahead. Watch out and enjoy. The movie begins in 1890 London when a horse-drawn carriage carrying Dr. John Watson and Inspector Lestrade drives past in the middle of the night. Sherlock Holmes, the legendary detective, follows on foot. He moves quickly, smoothly gliding between columns, up and down steps, around buildings, and into a plain-looking structure. Once inside, Holmes rushes down a spiral staircase but stops when he sees a henchman standing guard while waving a lamp. After doing some analysis, he kills the henchman. Until he reaches the basement, where a black magic ritual is being performed, he keeps racing down the stairs. To reassess the situation, Holmes conceals himself behind a column. He notices a young woman in a white dress, bound to a table in the middle of the space, with a hooded figure standing over her, chanting in Latin. The chamber is filled with henchmen and hooded people. When a guard approaches from behind him, Holmes is forced to stop planning how to kill them and deal with the guard. After a struggle with the guard, Watson arrives and chokes the man until he falls asleep. While the cloaked man finishes the ceremony, Watson and Holmes sprint downstairs and fight the henchmen, overwhelming most of them. The girl on the table reaches for a blade and prepares to stab herself. After taking out the henchman, Holmes dashes over and, barely in time, stops her. In order to address Holmes by name, the masked man stops and reveals himself to be Lord Henry Blackwood. Watson rushes over as Blackwood taunts Holmes, but Holmes stops him. It is shown that Lord Blackwood is wielding a razor-thin stiletto glass dagger that, had Watson gone any closer, would have pierced his nose. Lestrade and his men suddenly barge in as Holmes instructs Watson to tend to the girl. Lestrade reprimands Holmes for not waiting for his orders as Blackwood and his henchmen are taken into custody. In order to avoid reporting to Lestrade, Holmes claims that the girl's parents hired him. A newspaper photographer who wants to take their portrait interrupts Lestrade before he can respond. Holmes raises an arm to stop him from seeing his face in the photo. As a result, Lestrade is awarded full credit. 3 months later, Watson is attending to an elderly patient at 221B Baker Street. The patient inquires about Watson's plans to relocate his medical business while he gets dressed. He is indeed moving, according to Watson. After congratulating him on his marriage, the patient asks apprehensively if Holmes is moving as well. When Watson replies no, bullets burst out, sending both men running for safety. The patient quickly gets up, but Watson calms him down by saying that it's likely that Holmes is hanging a portrait with hammer and nails. Mrs. Hudson welcomes Watson when he walks outside to investigate the disturbance. She informs him that Holmes is agitated and asks him to settle him down. When the old patient emerges and begins to speak, there is another round of shooting. Watson instructs Mrs. Hudson to make the patient a cup of tea before he visits Holmes on his own. Additionally, he requests that Mrs. Hudson bring some food to cheer up Holmes. Watson opens the blinds and walks around his dim room. He begins poring over Holmes' letters and offers him potential cases to think about. Holmes casually and without hesitation resolves each one. As a fitting way to wrap up his final adventure with Holmes, Watson also notes that Holmes is once again in the news as Lord Blackwood is going to be hung and Watson will be the attending physician. Nothing seems to be lifting Holmes' spirits, so Watson drops the letter and advises him to leave the house. He informs Holmes that he will attend dinner with him and his intended spouse at a hotel in London. Holmes reluctantly concurs. Before Watson and Mary Morstan arrive at the posh restaurant, Holmes repeatedly checks his watch. As they chat, Holmes' detective skills start to reveal itself. Mary expresses doubt over Holmes' capacity for reasoning. Watson's walking stick alone reveals several fundamental facts about him, including the fact that he is a decorated Army veteran of the Afghan Wars. Watson objects as Mary wants Holmes to examine her. He notes that she is a governess and that she was previously engaged, but the engagement was probably broken off since the fiancé wasn't prosperous enough for her. By this time, Mary is beginning to feel uneasy about Holmes' words, but Holmes is unaware of her unease or Watson's cautions. He goes on examining still. She probably desires to do better this time, he adds. Mary throws a glass of wine in his face after being deeply hurt by his remark. Then she informs him that everything he claimed was accurate, but that her first fiancé had passed away. She then gets up to leave after being extremely offended by Holmes's rudeness, and Watson follows her. Holmes continues to eat by himself at the table. The prison guards at Scotland Yard are preparing for a possible uprising. A guard is having a seizure in front of Blackwood's cell, and nobody wants to get near him because they are afraid of his dark magic. When one of the more courageous guards inquires as to what he desires, the man replies that his last wish is to speak with Sherlock Holmes. Watson, meanwhile, makes his way up the Punch Bowl pub steps. He enters a room and discovers Holmes playing a violin while under the influence of cocaine. He is greeted by Holmes, who points to a bottle of captured flies. He informs Watson that the flies will fly counterclockwise when he plays a specific pitch. Holmes is told by Watson to wake up and dress properly because Lord Blackwood has made a request to see him. Holmes is brought to the jail by Watson. He tries to talk to Watson while they are in the carriage, but Watson rejects him. Finally, Watson gives Holmes a smack to the nose and admits to knowing about Mary's former fiancé. They argue for a bit before reaching the prison. The majority of the guards are wary of approaching Lord Blackwood too closely, then Holmes assures them that he can find his way to the cell on his own. Blackwood welcomes him and informs Holmes that he has not yet finished killing. He informs Holmes that there will be 3 unavoidable fatalities. Without giving his warnings much thought, Holmes exits. Blackwood is found guilty of murder, hanged, and confirmed dead by Watson. But the police learn that Lord Blackwood has miraculously returned from the grave and is once more at large. Irene Adler, a former enemy of Sherlock's and the subject of his obsession, assigns Sherlock the task of locating a man by the name of Riordan on behalf of her covert employer, who intimidates the typically unfazed Irene. Sherlock and Watson discover hints at Riordan's home, where they also discover Riordan's body inside Blackwood's coffin. The Temple of the Four Orders, a mysterious secret institution, recruits Sherlock to find Blackwood because they believe he has sinister ambitions to rule the world. In order to uncover Blackwood's strategy, Sherlock uses his extraordinary deductive abilities to piece together a sequence of evidence. He works with Adler and Watson to defeat Blackwood. Sherlock chases Irene as she flees with the cyanide cylinders after the two of them successfully stop the gas machine that was set to kill numerous members of Parliament. A brawl breaks out when Blackwood, Sherlock, and Irene arrive at the unfinished Tower Bridge. While Sherlock disproves Blackwood's wizardry and explains his inferences, Blackwood becomes entangled in a rope and hangs precariously from the bridge. It turns out that Lord Blackwood had been deceiving people into thinking he was a strong magician by utilizing both science and performance. Sherlock reveals that the dangerous compound that killed Blackwood's father could only be released when water, copper, and bath powder are combined. The police had already drained the water by the time Sherlock arrived at the scene, so there was no sign of the lethal concoction. The US ambassador's death by fire also turns out to be a science trick. As he tried to shoot Blackwood, a spark from his gun ignited a highly flammable chemical compound on his garments, causing him to burst into flames. Sherlock also adds that because Blackwood had already given them the antidote on the night the US ambassador died, those who were on his side were unwittingly shielded from the devastating consequences of the cyanide gas. And Blackwood had simply hired a police officer to break the cover off his tomb and then glue it back together, allowing him to escape from his grave. A shattered bridge block falls on Blackwood as Sherlock is explaining his case-related deductions, causing him to fall and hang himself from the Tower Bridge. Sherlock reveals to Watson and Mary how Blackwood had managed to survive his initial hanging by donning a noose with a concealed hook that had shifted his weight to his waist. Sherlock also discovers that Blackwood had pretended to be dead by ingesting a chemical derived from the rhododendron, which temporarily caused his pulse to drop to almost zero. This had been discovered by Sherlock at Riordan's laboratory. Irene reveals to Sherlock that Professor Moriarty, a cunning and dangerous man who should not be taken lightly, is her covert employer. Sherlock and Watson learn that a police officer was shot in the head at close range with a low-caliber pistol, killing him, and that a component of the gas device was missing. Sherlock concludes that Professor Moriarty shot the police officer, and that Moriarty stole the remote control equipment needed to activate the gas bomb. Sherlock understands that Irene simply left with the cylinders in order to provide a distraction while Moriarty stole the remote control technology. While Sherlock declares that he will solve the Moriarty case, Watson and Mary depart. Make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.